Okay, so back to our graphing calculator. We just want to get you guys started getting comfortable with your graphing calculator. Maybe you've never even experienced one. And then for all of us, we want to be starting to make those connections between when you see equations and what it should mean as a graph. Okay, so we're going to start by doing what we had at the bottom here of this page, comparing our graphs with the solutions that we obtained in the quadratic formulas. So from our previous notes. So those four, all I did is I just took them in here. There's exactly the work that we did. And now we just want to compare it with what would happen on the graphing calculator. Okay, so if I come over here, and on the graphing calculator, I'm going to put, so first, these equations always need to be set equal to 0 first, just like when we did the quadratic formula. So I'm going to say let y1 in your calculator equal that left side, 2x squared minus 7x plus 6. And then we'll talk about this. This is different techniques. We could say let y2 equal the right side, equal 0. And you should realize that y2 equaling 0 or y equals any number is a horizontal line. So y equals 0 should be the x-axis to you. Okay, so we'll debate about whether that needs to be in the picture or not in a few moments. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to our graphing calculator. Okay, so if you go to your calculator, you will see every button that I push turns red. So that's what you're going to have to watch kind of carefully. And let's practice a few different things. So one, let's go into y equals. Okay, if you've got anything sitting here, like I'll just make up something for a moment. If you've got anything sitting here, of course you could just push the clear button and make it go away. But if I did have something sitting here, notice the darkened equal sign, which I'm about to highlight right now. That means when you hit graph, it will graph. Now, if you highlight it and you push the enter button, you'll notice if you go to the right, it's not highlighted anymore. So now if you hit graph, the y equals 9x would not graph. So that's turning on and off your equations. The other troubleshooting part for you, in case you've done any stats or anything, is the following. Those plot 1, plot 2, plot 3 cannot be turned on. So if that plot 1 happens to be highlighted, I'll push enter and show you. So if you came back down, if that's on, you're probably going to have an issue. It's probably a stats thing. So all it means to do, and this is troubleshooting when you're on a quiz or test or whatever, go up to that plot 1, push your enter again. Okay, come back down. Notice it's not highlighted anymore. So you want all of those to be completely off. That's your first troubleshooting if you have had a graphing calculator but not a lot of experience with it. Okay, so I'm clearing out that equation. Like we said in y1, we're going to type 2x squared. So literally 2, x is that button right there that says xt, theta, and n. Yeah, there's a squared button over on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4 above the on key. But just in case you needed to raise something to the third power, fourth power, fifth power, and you weren't sure how to do that, let's take these steps. Let's raise it to, okay, so that button, the second. And now you notice that arrow. Okay, so on this one, if you keep typing, it's going to stay in the exponent. So if you push to the right arrow up here, that will now bring it back down so that you can now type minus, which is your subtraction key, 7x plus 6. Okay, push enter. And the nice thing here about this colored one is you'll know that your first equation that you're graphing is going to show up as blue. That's what that means to the left there. And my second equation is going to show up as red. So now I'm going to put in the y equals 0. Okay. Notice both of the equal signs are highlighted, so they're both going to graph. y1 will graph first, y2 will graph second, but that's the nice thing about the color, okay, is so that you can see which one is which, if you didn't already know. Okay, if it was a tougher problem. And then we need to chat about some of these other things so that you get a little bit familiar with them. So if you hit your window key, okay, this is telling you what your smallest x value and your largest x value, x min and x max, and what your scale is. In other words, I want you to usually graph in a 10 by 10 window. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that super quickly in a moment, but I need you to be able to manipulate this. So let's say I just wanted you to make your x min like -5. Here's the negative button. That's the first thing you need to know. Okay, next to the enter, it's never a subtraction sign. So if I wanted you to only graph this from -5, push enter, to let's say +5, push enter, and scale of 1 means every tick mark is 1. Okay, and then maybe the y min and max, we're fine with going from -2.5 to 2.5 and a y scale of 1. Those are really the only numbers that you need to mess with. Now, like I said, and just so you see this super quickly, I'm going to go ahead and hit graph, and you might just want to wait and watch. So notice this is now being drawn from, there are 5 tick marks to the left of the x-axis and the y-axis from the origin. Okay, and there's 2.5 up and down, right? Because that's the scale we put. I want you guys to graph them in a 10 by 10 window. So the nice fast thing to do for that, guys, is if you'll hit the zoom button and you say zoom standard, which is 6, is always a 10 by 10 window. Counting by 1. That means you know each and every single one of those tick marks is 1. Okay? Now, here was my point. We drew that red line at y2. For y2, we put in 0. That's the x-axis, isn't it? So do I really need to put that in there if I'm really just trying to find where that parabola, the blue function, the quadratic, if I'm just trying to find where that crosses the x-axis, do I really need that red line in there? And that answer would be no. Okay. Could you leave it in there and do the intersection, which you will hear me talk about soon? Do the intersection of these two curves, if you will? Most definitely. Okay. But I'm going to look at this a little bit differently. So we're going to go with the zeros, the roots, the solutions, the x-intercepts that we talked about. All of those mean the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to y equals. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn this one off, or better yet, even just delete it. Okay. All right. So we'll go back to zoom standard, right? That's your quick way. And now the only thing that I notice is I'm trying to figure out where that crosses the x-axis. I would like to blow it up a little bit more. So I really want to focus on that spot just a little bit more. So could I do some zoom? I want you guys to be kind of comfortable with this. Could I zoom in, which would be number 2? Notice there's a cursor. If I move over, only use right and left arrow keys, okay, for any time you're moving. Only right and left. Anything else will mess it up. So if I want to zoom in on that, guys, you push enter. Notice this isn't a zoom standard window anymore. It's not 10 by 10, but you do know that all of those tick marks are still counting by 1. Okay, that is the one thing that you know. So if I go ahead and get this out of our way for what we're talking about then. So if you actually hit the clear button, it'll make your cursor go away, okay, from flashing. And then let's just kind of analyze what is happening here. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up and take it to our notes that we're looking at here. There we go. Okay, if we will bring this down here. All right, so there we go. So now we're trying to make sense of the equation, right? And what we were doing on the graphing calculator. And so let's analyze this a little bit. A couple of things are happening. So one, we know quadratic, right, should mean 2 solutions. And those 2 solutions should be there and there, where those cross. We also know that we're counting by 1s. So if we labeled this, these tick marks, 1, 2, 3, and 4, well, it looks to me approximately like I am crossing at 1.5, so 3/2 for this one. It looks like this is also crossing at 2. Okay. Now, what if I actually wanted to calculate it? So I'm just trying to make the connection between the picture and what's going on. What if I actually wanted to, on my graphing calculator, actually calculate and get the 3/2 and the 2? Okay, so head back to your graphing calculator, and we want to calculate something. Okay, so it is the second button, and then you're going to hit the button that says trace. Now what you did is you picked the blue thing above it, so you're really calculating something. Okay, so notice the blue above the trace says calculate. Right, and then one thing you should know, some of you might be in a bad habit of doing this, is never, ever, ever use trace unless somebody is just saying, give me a quick approximation of the X and the Y value where something happens. Okay, trace is not accurate in the least. You have to do these calculations to get them to be completely accurate. Okay, so we want to calculate in your calculator. These are always called zeros. Okay, so if we want to find the 0, I'm going to go ahead and say calculate number 2. And notice it now says the blue equation. And your cursor is sitting somewhere in the middle. Always, right, what we said, always use your left and your right arrow key only. Now when it says, I got to make this a little bit taller for you to see. Okay. Let's see, it might make it full screen. There we go. When it says left bound, it's asking you, I want to be a little bit left of this place. Well, if I'm following the curve, right, the only time I'm going to be left of it is to be higher than the x-axis. And right bound, right, if I'm going to be right of this point, is going to be a little bit lower than the x-axis. So it all depends on the curve. Okay. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go move this to the, using the left arrow key. I'm going to move it until that cursor is just to the left of that intercept. Okay, so go a little bit so that you know you're definitely to the left of it, and push enter. Notice it kind of puts a bound there. And then right bound, well, now only use the right arrow key until you're to the right of that x-intercept. And push enter. And it's saying, you want me to find the one in between there? You want to go ahead and guess? You always have to push enter the third time, guys. So now it's actually making it exact. Okay, it's saying y is 0 when x is 1.5, which there you go, is 3/2. Okay, that we saw from the previous screen. All right, and then once again, just so you see the steps, guys, if you can do calculate, which remember is the second trace button, and now you are going to pick a 0 again. So number 2, and use your right arrow key. There you go. Now, if I'm going to be to the left of the next intercept, think about this for a moment. If I'm going to be to the left following this graph, and I'm going to be to the left of this, I'm going to be below the x-axis. My right bound is going to be above the x-axis. Okay, so keep that in mind. To be to the left, I'm pretty good right there being to the left. Okay, so I'll go ahead and push enter. Use your right arrow key until you're to the right of that intercept that's approximately there. So make sure you're to the right of it, push enter, and then guess. Yes, you always push enter again. Now it's giving you an exact 0, saying y is 0, right? That's the x-axis, when x is 2. Okay, and that is exactly the same numbers. We just had, what, 1.5 and 2, and those are the same things that we had sitting right here. Okay, 1.5 and 2. Now, why should I know that the parabola is opening up? That might be another connection we make. And that, guys, has to do with this number right here. Okay, that number is positive, and therefore it opens up. If it was negative, you can go experiment with it. That parabola would open down. Okay. All right, so for that second one then, if we go here, I am going to first, before I start with the graphing calculator, just make some approximations for myself. Okay, but I'll use the calculator. Notice our answers were 3 plus or minus root 17. So quickly, if I'm looking at 3 minus root 17, that's approximately, and this is another thing that you want to know, AP standard, which remember I'm teaching you for AP calculus. So AP standard is always to round or truncate to the nearest thousandth, which is 3 decimal places. So when you're not given direction in the next couple of years, okay, if you are trying to do a homework and you're not given any specific direction and you're dealing with decimals, try going to 3 decimal places, okay? Anyway, 3 minus the square root of 17 is approximately negative 1.123. And 3 plus root 17 is 7.123. All right, so I'm going to be putting in y1. I'll be putting in the, again, I've got to use it where it's set equal to 0. So I'm going to be putting it in that form. X squared minus 6x minus 8. I'm not going to put in the y2 equals 0, right, because we know that's the x-axis, and I'm just going to be finding roots. All right, we're on our graphing calculator. Graphing calculator. So back over here, go to y equals, clear that out, get your x squared. So again, x to the second power. You need to bring that down, so push the right arrow key. Minus is your subtraction key. 6x minus 8. I want to be a zoom standard window so that it's in a 10 by 10 window. Okay, now I'm comfortable with that, looking at that. Okay, I'm comfortable seeing that and realizing that that's a parabola coming down from left to right, hitting its lowest point and then going back up. If you're not comfortable, you may play with the window and change it, okay? But I see the important parts, and that is where it crosses, okay, the x-axis. And again, I am looking at, if we will take this to that page, okay, and there we are, then I can estimate, right, if I go ahead and put this back in here, since I know my scale, right, I know I'm counting by 1, well, this is approximately -1, and notice, I have approximately -1 where it's supposed to cross up here. Okay, and the next one's supposed to be at 7. So yeah, if you count it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7.1, yeah, it's crossing definitely between 7 and 8, and much definitely closer to 7. Okay, so I know that's a little bit of a small scale, but that's what's happening there. And then again, we should go back and make sure that we understand how to calculate that. Okay, letting the calculator do it. So over here, back on this, then we'll do this one more time, and then we'll see if you guys can figure out the last two yourself. Okay, and we'll try to make some connections. So here we go. We're going to calculate something. Second, calculate a 0. You've got to do it twice. We want to use our left and right arrows. Left and right only. So to be left, if I'm coming down from left to right, left would be above the x-axis. Push enter. That's my left bound. Go to the right until you're a little bit to the right of that intercept. Push enter, and then go ahead and push guess. And now notice your 0 is at x equals -1.123 if we are rounding to the nearest thousandth. Okay, -1.123. And that's exactly what we had on the previous screen. Okay, and do that one more time. Second, trace, find the 0, go to the right. Now the left bound this time will be below the x-axis. So went a little too far. Just come back. There you go. Okay, so you're to the left, below the x-axis, push enter, move it to the right of that point, push enter, go ahead and guess in between. And notice, okay, I want you to be comfortable with y equals 1e to the negative 12. Now what that's supposed to mean to you is 1 times 10 to the negative 12th. That's supposed to be scientific notation. If you think about 1 times 10 to the negative 12th and move that decimal place, that is approximately so close to 0 that it is called 0, okay? And it's just how the calculator is set up. So you need to recognize that as y equaling 0. All right, and the x value is, what do you know? 7.123 rounded, which is exactly the same numbers that we had when we were back in our lesson, okay, right here. There's those two values that we just found, okay? Again, why is this parabola opening up? I know I'm comfortable with it opening up because the number in front of this x squared is a 1, right? It's positive. And let's check out and make the connections between the last two. So both this example and example 1 had two intersects. Okay, intercepts, x-intercepts, zeros, whatever you want to call them. It's where those cross, okay? And that's because the highest powers to its quadratic should make sense, okay? Because it can have up to 2 answers. All right, so then making the connection, going to this one, let's see. So on our graphing calculator again, I want the part where it's set equal to 0, and it is. Okay, so I'm thinking that on the graphing calculator, I'm going to be putting y1 equals 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. And I notice just the answer here, remember I only get one answer, but I have to say it's repeated, right? Which we saw here from our factored form, that you just get that same answer twice. And so I'm wondering what that means when we get to our graph on the graphing calculator. Okay, so let's see what happens. So let's go back into y equals. Go ahead and clear that out. Type in our 4x to the second power. Bring down that cursor by pushing to the right. Minus is your subtraction sign. 4x plus 1. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and zoom standard. So zoom 6. And wow. Now, I'm wondering if that really crosses the x-axis twice, right? Or if it really just touches once, and we'll try to make all the connections. But let's say that I didn't know the answers from the quadratic formula. Okay, I didn't know that I was just supposed to get 1/2, which really should mean it's just touching 1/2 and bouncing right back up. Then I would need to probably play around with our zoom button. Again, okay, I want to zoom in on something, and then you would move over to that area. You really want to see what's happening there. Hitting that right arrow key, push enter. And so now you can see if you push clear, get that cursor out of there, really, it looks like it's just touching and going right back up. Okay, so I am going to say again that if I will take this and put it in here for you, and we just kind of examine what's happening here. Okay, then I would say I know that those tick marks are counting by 1, and therefore I'm pretty comfortable saying, yeah, that's definitely looking like, if that's 0 and that's 1, that's looking like about 1/2 right there. Okay, which is the answer that we got. And we know that since it's a quadratic, that you would be saying 1/2 twice, right? You'd be getting a double root. Let's make the connection though, going back to the calculator. Okay, if we go ahead and practice this one more time, and we do second trace, calculate the 0. We just want to be left of that place, so that's going to be above the x-axis. Push enter. The right bound then, we got to be to the right of where that touches the x-axis, so again, we're going to be above the x-axis. Push enter, enter for the third time. And of course, it does tell you y is 0 when x is 0.5, which is the 1/2 that we desired back on the previous screen. Okay. All right, so back to there. We definitely are getting x to the 1/2. You just always have to make that constant connection between the equation being quadratic and needing 2 answers, and you seeing it in your calculator as 1/2 and knowing that you need to put double root. Okay, so there's your connection there. Again, why does it open up? And that is as simple as this is a positive coefficient on the x squared. Okay, 4 is positive. All right, moving to our last one then. I wonder what's going to happen, because this one says no solution, no real solution, right? Okay, so let's try it out. So on our graphing calculator, we're going to put in y1 equals x squared minus 2x plus 5. All right, so let's go do that. Over here, get into your y equals, clear that out. Let's do x. Here's your other squared button, guys, if you ever want to use it. Okay, I went ahead and did that. That's your squared button. I was just practicing in case it was a different power, but if you want to use that, notice it's already down. Okay, it's not in the exponent now. So minus your subtraction sign, 2x plus 5. Go ahead and do a zoom standard window. Okay. Now, based on the stuff that we've done, the x squared has a 1 coefficient in front of it, so I do expect this parabola to open up. I'm completely comfortable with that. If you are not, play around with your window. Okay, change your x and your y scale until you can see a little bit more of it, but I'm cool with that. And I'm also understanding that, let's go ahead and take this up here for you. I'm also comfortable with the fact that, this answer is supposed to be no real solution, meaning there should be no zeros, no x-intercepts. Well, my graph completely agrees. It never touches the x-axis, okay, never crosses. And so those answers would be imaginary, which you've heard before with the taking the square root of negative numbers. We'll be talking about imaginary numbers soon. Okay, but it never crosses. Now the question is, let me ask you a couple of things. So one, why is this all above the x-axis? Why is this graph completely above the x-axis? Because I could have a parabola down here, right? That never touches the x-axis. Well, think about what's happening. One, you do know it's going to open up, and for it to open up with this positive coefficient in the front and not cross the x-axis, it would have to be all above the x-axis. And two, so if it was this one down here, then it would have a negative coefficient in the front, right, to be able to never cross. And two, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. If you go ahead and plug in, because sometimes you won't be able to see the graph if it's non-graphing calculator, but you're just trying to make the connection, plug in some numbers for x, guys. Okay, no matter what you plug in here for x, right here, you're always going to get a number greater than 0. Okay, and so if you're always going to get a y value that's greater than 0, no matter what you plug in for x, it should make sense that if you plotted those points, right, positive or negative x values, but all the y values are positive, should make sense that it's going to be completely above the x-axis. Okay. All right. So definitely play around with your calculator, guys. Get more comfortable with it. Really try to get down the buttons that I at least showed you today. It'll greatly help you in the next section in a few days when we jump into all graphing calculator stuff. And there's even more that we're going to show you. Okay, so see what you can do with this. Good luck. Let me know if you need help.